Standard Super League playoff time. I'm joined, as usual, by Luis Scott Vargas. How are things, LSV?
Things are going pretty well here. Get to watch some Unified Standard. I'm a big fan of Unified formats. I've played a brief amount because they haven't been legal in high level play all that often, but when they are, they're really fun.
I completely agree. I think that it sets itself up really well for a playoff format here. I know that when we were doing Vintage Super League, we kept trying to come up with some way to have something like this, and it doesn't work super well in Vintage, where kind of every deck needs at least the threat of having Force of Will, or it totally changes the metagame. But here, yeah, you get this nice, interesting puzzle of how do I build three standard decks to take into battle that don't overlap.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing what trade-offs you have to make. We're going to talk about the decks a little later, but there's a notable absence in both players' list of decks, and I think that's because a lot of the cards overlap in a way that you just have to make choices, and that is much more interesting.
Yeah, I know that the players aren't allowed to watch the pregame show, so we can say there are no Abzan decks.
Exactly.
Nowhere. 0 for 6. Neither player has an Abzan deck coming to the table. And, we were talking just before we turned the camera on. We think that that's probably the black removal and the Thoughtseize, that's the overlap that the Abzan deck needs, but then you can't play a control deck if you give those cards to Abzan?
Yeah, I think well, it's partially that. That seems like one of the big factors. The other is that you can't play a devotion deck, very easily if you have Keratin and or Courser, depending on which of those, plus potentially Den Protector or Raptor. Like, Abzan's just a greedy deck. It's taking, it's not sharing Siege Rhino with everyone. Its best card is not a card that overlaps, but it wants all the good green cards and all the good black cards. And, both players chose to break it up into like a red-green, just like a straight red-green deck and a blue-black control deck. One, Raptor with blue-black-white Esper Dragons, and then Tom with just straight-up blue-black.
It's really interesting to me how similar and yet completely different these decks are, because, like you say, both players have a blue-black control deck, but Tom went with the Adrian Sullivan no creatures version of blue-black, whereas Josh is on the Esper Dragons deck that, he's really the guy that innovated this at the Pro Tour.
Yeah. Much to my chagrin, I did not actually play the deck that all my teammates did incredibly well with, which I'm not going to say it doesn't bother me still, but it's funny watching Josh run it back, and it's funny too that I talked to him after he got back from Providence, where he ended up not making day two with the deck. That he's like, man, I never did well with this deck in Grand Prix, but he did very, very well in the Pro Tour, he made top 16. And we'll see how, he won last week's Standard Super League, and we'll see how he does today in the semis with it.
Yeah, and then those decks are actually matched up against each other. So we get kind of the battle for blue-black control similarity. I know Adrian Sullivan, for one, still swears by that deck. That's what he was running in Providence, for that matter. The middle matchup, like you mentioned, the players both went with a green-red deck, but their green-red decks are also very different. Tom went green-red dragons, whereas Josh is on the devotion side of that split.
Yeah, I was funny. I was talking to Josh before he submitted his decks, and he's like, I really don't know whether to play green-white devotion or red-green devotion. And it looks like he ended up going with red-green, which I do think is better in this particular matchup, because red-green devotion has a Tarka, and a Tarka seems a lot better in Mastery Unseen when your opponent's plan is to kill you with Thunderbreak Regent and Stormbreath Dragon.
I'll buy that. The last deck that these guys come up with, it's essentially they're both white-red something else with their last set of decks. I don't know, maybe my analogy breaks down here, but Tom went with...
It's close enough.
Yeah, close enough. I like it. Tom went with the Ojutai Jeskai list that essentially made its debut in the hands of a number of the Roanoke-based players that he tests with a lot, Ojutai Jeskai, whereas Josh is on Mardu Dragons. So white-red-black for Josh, white-red-blue for Tom, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if it would have been more of a mirror if the Mardu Dragons was fighting the red-green dragons, but, who knows?
Yeah, no, a lot of it did come down to those details, right? Because Tom did not have Ojutai in his control deck, he kind of freed it up to be the Ojutai Jeskai list as his third list. And Josh actually has kind of two dragon-based decks, so he actually had to split up his Foul Tongue Invocations and his Haven of the Spirit Dragon between two decks.
Luckily, Esper doesn't really care about playing more than two Havens, like two is likely the correct number. So it's really the Foul Tongues where it hurts, but it's not in matchups where the Foul Tongues were that needed. At least the Foul Tongues were more needed in against the Jeskai deck. Obviously against blue-black Foul Tongues, not really a prized possession.
The card Tom had to split up, by the way, Dig Through Time. He's on 2 and 2. He's only got 2 in his blue-black control list, and he's only got 2 in his Ojtai Jeskai list.
That's a significant sacrifice, playing only 2 dig through times in your blue-black deck. Taking a look at the list, yeah, he has to bolster it with 2 Jason's Ingenuity and 1 Interpret the Signs, which that deck did play some number of.
Yeah, Adrian. I went back and looked. Adrian had 3 dig through times when he top 4'd the Pro Tour, so he didn't actually have the full 4.
Which I still am suspicious of. I think that card, after playing these decks a lot, that card is just so good.
He loves the Dragon Lord's Prerogative. He loves the Interpret the Signs. Like, Adrian's a man who likes his 1-0s.
Yeah, there's a lot of good card drawing options. I think Dig just happens to be the best, and Tom has to pay some amount of a price by splitting those up.
The other surprising thing to me looking at these lists, Josh does not have any Den Protectors. No Den Protector, no Death Mist Raptor, no Satyr Wayfinder. That package just didn't make it into his lists at all.
It's surprising because Den Protector is like one of the 5 best cards in Standard.
That's what I thought. That was, like I said, that was the thing. It's not even in his Devotion list.
So I think that the reason for that is the Devotion decks don't really care about Den Protector all that much. It just doesn't go with their plan of going big, especially since Josh is just not playing. Without Mastery of the Unseen, and the Death Mist Raptors also get a little weaker. I've talked to a number of people who've played Death Mist and Red Green and just don't like it that much. So once you're not playing Death Mist Raptor, once you're just trying to go big, Den Protector are really not as crucial as just playing like a 7-drop.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you said he wound up where he was happy to be Esper Dragons plus Marduk Dragons, and then he just didn't know whether it was green-white or green-red for the last deck. I mean, I guess if you get there, then he happened to choose the one that didn't really want the Den Protector or Death Mist Raptor synergy.
Yeah, it's not really. I think the way Josh didn't think I want to play all the Den Protectors and I want to play all the Thought Seizes, etc. He just first the way you approach Unified Standards. First, you look at what are the 3 archetypes that don't overlap that much. You try to look at what are the best decks, how do they interact. It probably became quickly clear that Abzan interacts overlaps poorly with a bunch of other decks. So maybe you set Abzan aside. Seems pretty clear you should play a blue-based control deck because that deck plays a ton of cards nobody else wants. And then once you're there, Devotion is kind of an obvious choice, and then they both went to a different red-white deck. Josh gets to this point and is just looking at well, I guess I just don't want Death Mist Raptor or Den Protector. Those are at their best in Abzan, and yeah, he just didn't have room for that. It would have been interesting to know if he wanted a Sultai deck. It's possible that he could have played a Sultai control deck, kind of like what Owen Turtenwald played at the Grand Prix, which is basically just Abzan minus Siege Rhino plus Disdainful Stroke and Dig Through Time.
Yeah, but then he doesn't get Dig Through Time for his Esper Dragons deck.
Yeah, I guess my idea would be you maybe replace Esper Dragons deck with this, but I don't actually know if that's good.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's a cool format. We should put the bracket up, make sure we sort of take stock of anybody who's joining us maybe doesn't know quite what we're up to. It is playoff time for the Standard Super League. We're down to these 3 players, and this week is the semifinals, so it'll be Tom versus Josh. But it's a full-size show. These guys are playing best 3 out of 5 matches. So both players brought 3 decks with them. They set them up like the A, the B, the C. So first they played them in that order, and then for match 4 and match 5, if necessary, they get to pick from their 3 decks. The winner comes back next week to take on Owen Turtenwald, and same format. Both players show up with 3 unified standard decks. We got here. We can put the full regular season standings up if you guys haven't seen the final regular season standings. It all came down to an awesome match last week. The battle for the last playoff spot was, in fact, last week's final. It was Brad Nelson versus Josh Utter-Layton, and even now that you know Josh Utter-Layton won, if you haven't watched that match, if you're a fan of seeing good Magic played by great players, I mean, just a spectacular match. The 2 of them put on a clinic. Highly recommend going back and watching that final. It's a little on the long side, but quite worth the time in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that if I had to make a list of top 10 matches to watch, that would probably be there. I mean, that's pretty high praise, but I think that match was just that interesting. And part of the reason it was interesting was that that it would never have come to a natural conclusion if they were playing in paper, unless they were playing an untimed round like in a top 8 or something.
Sure.
So it was just a lot of fun to watch. I remember normally when the last match goes that late and I'm just like, man, I got work tomorrow. This is brutal. I wasn't thinking that at all. 0%. I was just like, this match is awesome. I want to see how it ends. It was really grabbing my attention.
The only other match I've seen lately that I think is even close is, did you go back and watch the Kenji match against, I think it's Shota at the Modern Masters GP in Chiba?
No, I did not.
So good. Do it. I won't say anything more. It's not that hard to find on YouTube. I mean, it's Modern Masters sealed deck, but spectacular match. I don't know. Do I need to tease it? Just crazy scenarios, and again, it's two just truly great players who were at the height of their powers, making super cool plays.
Yeah, I mean, in a plug for Worlds this year, the event I've had the most fun covering was Worlds 2 years ago when I was on the coverage team for that, because you're just watching these players and you can just do so much anticipating of what they're thinking about because they're just going really deep. Like I remember a match of Stanislav Sivka against Yuya where Stan had two Rude Awakenings in his deck, which makes all his lands into 2/2s, and that was like the way he would win the game. And Yu-Gi-Oh was playing against Stan's no creature board very strangely, like leaving creatures back and like doing all this stuff. And the whole reason was because of these Rude Awakenings, and a normal match is just never like that. You always just look at like, there's a lot of just level one, like I'm going to attack with everything because my opponent has no creatures out. Whereas in these matches, you can just do all this like, you can actually be confident that the players are thinking about all these things, which is awesome. So whenever you see two great players play, it's just really incredible to watch.
I think you gave me the perfect segue. And if you like watching great players play Magic, we got more Super Leagues coming up for you. I do want to let people know that Vintage Super League is coming back. So starting after the finals, 2 weeks from tonight, Vintage Super League Season 3. We've got 8 players, and the way this is going to work, this is basically everybody we had from last year. David Williams was unfortunately relegated. Kai is going to be doing some traveling and a lot of Pro Tour prep in July, so he's going to step this out. We're going to play double elimination for this Season 3. And the reason we're playing double elim and having a bit of a shorter season is we're actually going to have the Super Leagues sort of team up together for a Super League championship coming up this fall. So Vintage Super League is going to be followed by the next season of Standard Super League, and it's going to be followed by the first season of Modern Super League, and all 3 of those Super Leagues are going to feed into a Super League championship, which is going to be Standard right after Battle for Zendikar comes out. So after PT, I guess that's PT Milwaukee, we'll get the best from Vintage, the best from Standard, the best from Modern, couple of last chance qualifier winners together, and that should be a lot of fun. I'm actually really happy with the way the Super League has come together for essentially this is the plan for the rest of the year.
Yeah, this is a super league here. We've got Vintage, Standard, and Modern all feeding the Super League championships plus 2 last chance qualifiers, it looks like. So I'm excited for Vintage to be back in 2 weeks, right? Like that's pretty soon. I've got to decide what deck to play.
I was going to ask you because I believe you've spent more time in the dailies, the Vintage dailies on Magic Online than I have lately. Have things changed that much? Are there crazy new Vintage decks going on, or is it basically where we left off with the last season of Vintage Super League?
There's not hugely significant differences. There are more different mentor decks floating around, but workshops
yet.
Yeah, I think there are. I actually just 4-0'd a daily with a mentor deck on Sunday that played out pretty well. Just like mentors and Dax, kind of like what Ifro played when I played against him in the semis. And I think Vintage is still pretty interesting. I always felt more in tune with it during VSL because we had a lot more people just kind of hammering it away at it. But
Yep.
it is interesting to see what people get up to and kind of like how the metagame shifts. Right now, it's more small tweaks than it is big shifts because, Vintage is pretty impervious to new sets coming out. Like, not that much changes. Like, you don't get a Khan's block very often. Khan changed Vintage a ton. But it's still, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. I'm really excited to see what people bring to the table.
Yeah, me too. That will be one deck for the length of the double elim is how that's going to work out, by the way. And double elim works out to basically be 3 normal length shows, so nobody gets eliminated in the first week, and then the second week winds up being a whole bunch of elimination matches, and then week 3 we get to crown a winner. We are playing for a foil set of Vintage Masters, so I got a nice sweet prize to play for too, and then feeding into the championships in the fall. So that's queued up. That's 2 weeks from now. Be nice to get to play. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a couple minutes away from starting up our semifinals here. I know people keep asking about the 57. You've now had the precipitous fall by not going to Free Providence. You just keep slipping down the standings.
Yeah, it's tough. I might have to go to Montreal to try to defend myself because So I'm not going to Singapore
Or Buenos
or
Aires.
or Buenos Aires. Yeah, that's a bit much. Montreal's looking potential here. I'm not gonna say yes
All
or
right.
no yet, but
But you've earned the 57. You're going to hold on to it. You don't
it's
want the Hall
true.
of Fame logo back.
No. 57 is an accurate representation of my standing as a Magic player. So I believe that's how it works.
Maybe. Am I supposed to change that? I was trying to figure out what my number would be. Like, I don't actually have any pro points because I can't play anything, which would put me like 3,044th. I think I'm tied right now. But
I'll take it, but
well, here's the thing though. I have showed up for 3 pro tours that I was qualified for, so I figure I have at least 9 pro points.
that's how many I got from those 3 pro tours.
Right. That would be so 265. I think is my number if we do the math that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely in the top. I'm 3,000. I'm not going to buy. I don't know if I'm in the top 100 these days, but definitely in the top 3,000. Funny stuff.
And have we figured out how relegations are going to work for the Standard Super League yet? Is that something that
So Brian Kibler was relegated from the Standard Super League.
right?
He will not be in that Standard Super League season 2. The way I'm gonna do Standard League season 2. I mean, I'm happy to go ahead and talk about that format too because it is decided. It's going to be a 12-person tournament. The way the standard is going to work, they're going to be 3 groups of 4 players each. So it's almost like a World Cup soccer format or something. You're in a group, and then you play round robin. You play everybody in your group once, and the top 2 from the group advance to the elimination. With 3 groups, that works out to be 6 people advancing. So tiebreakers are going to get weird, and at some level, I'm just going to embrace the fact that it's a show designed for entertainment. The tiebreakers are not necessarily the most fair way to decide things, but hey, if you never lose, you're totally taken care of. If we do wind up in a tie, then, I mean, match wins, obviously, game wins, fewest game losses, head-to-head, which very rarely helps, but the ultimate tiebreaker, if you're tied on both game wins and fewest game losses, I'm just going to do lifetime pro points.
Sure. I mean, that doesn't.
Not saying it's fair, just saying something's got to break the tie. If it comes down to it, lifetime pro points will break the tie, both for advancement and also with a 6-person playoff bracket. There's 2 buys to be divided up amongst the 3 group winners, so it could matter there as well.
Or we could do the deck that has the most cards that say draw a card on it. Like the most cards your deck can draw by casting all its cards.
Lifetime pro points is not good enough for you. Come on, would you lose a lifetime pro points tiebreaker to?
That's true.
For one for your own personal gain.
There aren't a ton of people who can beat me in lifetime pro points, though they can easily defeat me if we're talking about player of the year standings. So, 6 one way, half dozen the other. Well, actually, only 56 people can beat me in the second category. So,
not that many. So yeah, I think that's standard format. I actually really like groups. You get a little bit of round robin. You get to see everybody play. And then the other thing with those groups is I'm not going to set the groups up randomly. I think it's cool to have sort of themes to the groups. So the plan for Standard Super League, I mean, I haven't locked everybody down. I haven't got everybody to commit. But my current plan, and I think it's going to work out, is to have a streamer group, to have a brewer group, and then what group format tournament would be right without a group of death?
Yeah, I guess that's pretty interesting.
I think it's going to be nice.
The good thing about that is it's just completely objective. So
exactly. So yeah, that's Standard Super League. Vintage is first though. Vintage is just 8 of us, double a limb. I'm not going to roll the bracket up until everybody submitted deck lists, so there won't be any of the metagaming shenanigans. It's just, you know who the other 7 guys are, but you got to play your deck for 3 weeks and essentially emerge victorious at the end of a random double a limb bracket.
Right.
Looks like Tom is now here, which is great. We shouldn't be too far away from getting down to the match. Maybe we can look at some deck lists for the first matchup. First up between these guys, we talked about they're playing Unified Standard. It just happens that both of them put together a blue-black control deck, and both of them happen to put their blue-black control deck into the A slot. So the first match we're going to watch is going to be best 2 out of 3 match. Tom Ross is on the Adrian Sullivan side of blue-black control decks. 2 Ugins, 7 total Planeswalkers, but 0 creatures in this deck.
And trying to look at how many answers to Ojutai Tom has. He does have like he's maxed out on Perilous Vaults, but this deck is actually a little softer to Ojutai than you might want to be. Like this deck actually looks very much built to beat green decks. Look at this: 4 Ashiok,
Yeah.
4 Perilous Vault. That is a deck that is aiming to play against Centaur or Corsair Crewfix decks.
Yeah, I'll buy that. What it's actually going to be playing against, though, is Esper Dragons. That is the list Josh Utter-Layton has brought to the table. Blue-black with just enough white for 4 copies of Dragon Lord Ojutai.
And Josh has the dragon setup, which I really like, which I've been advocating for a while, which is 4 Dragon Lord Ojutai, shamelessly stolen from Jerry, and also 1 Dragon Lord Silumgar. None of this 3/7 Silumgar nonsense. I don't think that the Dragon deck is where you want to be. And Dragon Lord Silumgar against a deck with 7 Planeswalkers is awesome. Like,
good point.
Is Tom going to be able to, pass with a Planeswalker that after he ticks it up to being able to ultimate? Josh can just go Thoughtseize Dragon Lord Ultimate.
Yeah, we saw this matchup was basically. I felt like Esper Dragons was advantaged at the Pro Tour itself. I don't know. That is Adrian lost to Shota, right? Isn't that how the semifinals played out?
Adrian lost to Martin Dang.
He lost to Martin Dang. Right.
Playing Modern Red, yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, the Esper deck that Shota made the finals of the Pro Tour with, similar, but he didn't have as much of the White Splash or Ojutai, which just seems like it puts this deck over the top. Now, Josh did have to make a couple sacrifices here. He's only got 2 copies of Foul Tongue Invocation and 2 copies of Haven of the Spirit Dragon because he's got another dragon deck. I think those are the only sacrifices he made here. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it looks like it. Other than that, it's fairly standard, and those are not sacrifices that are going to come bite him in this matchup. Really, like
being down Foul Tongues is okay against the creatureless deck.
Yeah, that is more than fine. And this deck frequently just plays 2 Havens anyway. Sometimes it plays 3, but it's not a huge difference. This is a grindy matchup, but I don't think that that's going to cost him very much. And
go ahead.
Oh, just Josh's sideboard is also looking pretty decent with Dragon Lord's Prerogatives and Tassiger and Duress. I like all those cards.
That's a good point. Yeah, I actually feel like the place the Havens are really important in this deck is just getting the white mana for Ojutai.
That's a big part of the reason that they're in there. Is there are planes that actually has other applications. And that's part of the reason this Esper deck doesn't play any other white spells besides Ojutai is because Haven lets you kind of cheat on white sources.
Yeah, it's got, 9 white sources if you count the Havens? Or no, Flooded Strand. There's no planes for Flooded Strand, so it's 8. Yeah, a little tight, but, I mean, you don't need it till turn 5. You can live without it for a little while, so...
And you have Scrylands and Anticipates, so it ends up working out all right. The arguments about this mana base took a long time during testing.
Oh, I'm sure. You guys wound up ultimately just, it's good enough, we're going to gamble a little bit, or you're actively happy with it?
We're happy with it, but basically the last, one of the last decisions is, do you play Flooded Strand, but you do not play any planes in your Esper deck? And the ultimate decision was that drawing planes is just so bad for the deck that the deck, even though it has Flooded Strand and is playing Esper, does not have a planes in it.
Makes sense. Yeah, that will be our first matchup. Go ahead.
So we can run through, if you want to run over the plan for the next couple of Super Leagues again. A lot of people just got here and are curious about that. If you want to,
sure, happy to.
Just take a couple seconds to do that.
Part 1 of what we've announced today is that Vintage Super League will be back as soon as we're done with Standard Super League. So 2 weeks from tonight, the 8 magicians that you see on your screen will be back, and it works out. This is actually the 8 of us that were in both Season 1 and Season 2. Yeah, so these are your regulars, I guess. Kai's still a part of the Vintage Super League, expected him to be in the next season, but he didn't necessarily want to play from the road while he was traveling in the run-up to the Pro Tour coming up in Vancouver, so 8 works well for double elimination. That is the plan.
Do you think, though, for the top 3, we could just put everyone who made the semifinals or that made the playoffs multiple times? We could just say those people who make the top 3, because I think that would be me and Ifra, right? So
it would be you and Eric. You're all about the self-serving tiebreakers today.
I was arguing against self-serving tiebreakers with the Pro Points thing.
All right, fair enough. So yeah, 2 weeks from tonight, Vintage Super League, Double Elim will basically cover all of the Tuesdays up until the Pro Tour week. And then Super League will take the week off for the Pro Tour in Vancouver. We're also going to take off the week after that. And then we can show you the other thing that's going on. This Vintage Super League, not only are we going to crown a Vintage Super League champ, we're also going to qualify 3 people for the Fall Super League Championship. So 3 people from Vintage, which is an 8-player double elim, 4 people from Standard Super League, which is going to be a 12-player tournament using standard right after the Pro Tour Origins. So we'll get to see what everybody wants to do with Origins. We've got 7 people eligible for the Standard Super League based off of the current season. Basically everybody except Brian Kibler. I haven't confirmed that everybody can definitely play, but it's going to be 12 people. It's going to be 3 groups of 4 players each. And tentatively, we're going to line the groups up as the Streamer group, the Brewer group, and the Group of Death. Modern is on tap as soon as we're done with Standard, so that'll essentially be September, sort of in the run-up toward Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar. We'll be playing Modern. It'll be an 8-person double elim. I don't have details for you beyond that, but just like the Vintage 8-person double elim qualifies 3, that also qualifies 3. And there you go. One last chance qualifier where the top 2 advance. And then, yeah, Battle for Zendikar Standard this fall is going to be a lot of fun with that Super League Championship. That's the plan. But first, we got a Standard Super League to finish. Let's